Hi, this is Michael. I'm back today to work on the SAT essay section. I've worked on the reading and the writing, and I've heard back from some of the kids over at the SAT subreddit, and we've worked back and forth a few times. Really appreciate the feedback. I hope this has been helpful. I enjoyed helping some of those students actually correct some of the errors and apply some of the strategies in. And I've been asked to do an essay section. But one quick word of note, a little disclaimer here. Uh, the moderators on that forum don't like me posting links to my website. Whatever, it's a new policy. They've eliminated all the posts I did doing that. Whatever, it's their website. I don't care. I'm not here to sell anything. I don't run ads on my website. I'm just putting this up because I got on the sub because I joined Reddit to look into folks who are supporting my new beautiful Windows Surface Duo, which is an awesome phone. And I noticed that when I was there that there's a SAT Reddit, and I looked into that. And you guys are awesome. I love the way you support each other. Whatever, they have the rules. If you want to post stuff that I do, you're welcome to it. I'm here just to help. Okay, so let's get right into the SAT essay. I'm going to join right on my tablet now. Alrighty, so when we look at the anything we're going to be measured on, we want to know, well, what is that source of measuring? So we want to take a peek at this SAT essay scoring first. So the old SAT essay used to be just a prompt, and then kids would just respond to the prompt, take a position on something, and then demonstrate how awesome they are at bringing in literary references and stuff like that. So the SAT actually did a good thing here, and they turned it into a textual-based three-part scoring sections, which I'll go over right now. I like this. It's rhetorical analysis, which is cool. It's just understanding the text, interpreting it, and then measuring it, and then showing your writing skills while you go about doing that. Not just, it's less creative writing, although you can still be creative. That's a good thing. So let's just understand how it works. Okay. By the way, there's plenty of stuff you can do here to look into sample responses, and I guess you got some instant writing feedback, whatever. That's probably just Grammarly type stuff. So one of the problems here, by the way, if you do practice on the computer and you do take the test on paper, you are not practicing for test day. So when you do actual really serious practice, make sure that you're going to be writing out your essay on paper, because that's what you will do on test day, not using a computer, not using, spell check, et cetera, et cetera. And get used to that, because there's a lot of implications on when you write on paper. One, your handwriting. If it's like mine, it's horrible. And two, how you edit it is vastly different. So you have to get used to that. So please, please, please work on paper. Okay. And that's one of my problems with Khan Academy, because kids go online and they do all the different practice online, but you're going to take the test on paper. So use the book, print it out. If you don't have the book, get the book. It's only $20. Okay. So let's go through what happens here on this test. So the first thing is there are three parts. Like I said, there's reading, there's analysis, and then there's writing. And this is just typical rubric on, let's take a peek at here. This is just typical AP SAT type scoring, where the top score will be demonstrates thorough comprehension of the text. So we just want to pay attention to some of those little modifiers that they use to demonstrate what does it mean to be 100% or to get near 100%. Is that thorough comprehension of the source text? Okay, because that's what we're doing here, is we're showing our comprehension of our ability to read the text. Okay, and understand the text central idea. It's free of errors or interpretation regarding the text. Make skillful use of textual evidence. So that's big. You're going to be measured on if you bring in evidence from the text. Okay, quotations, paraphrases, or both, demonstrating a complete understanding of the source text. Now, when we get into some of the different things, like 3 is effective comprehension, some comprehension, and score 1 would be little or no comprehension. That's just typical stuff. And by the way, just so you know, the way these get scored, they're two teachers are assigned, rather every essay is assigned to two teachers. This is the way it used to be. I assume it's still the same. And those teachers, it used to be, they would all go to some big hotel in Ohio, these teachers who enjoy doing this kind of stuff, and they would get together and they would spend a couple days grading all these essays. And they have their rubrics and they mark what the score is. And if there's a difference between the two, they average it out. If it's a massive difference, like one gives it a 2, another one a 4, then they send it to a third person who gives another look at it. But generally speaking, the teachers have a pretty good sense together on what these things look like. But remember this, they're going to be sitting there reading hundreds of these things. So you're competing with their reading other student stuff. That doesn't mean you have to be unique, but it does mean that you need to be as free of errors as possible. Don't give them excuses to mark you down because of someone else. Okay, that's all that is. All right, so the next thing is analysis. So the analysis scoring guide is to demonstrate, let's see, thorough score 4. What does that mean? A score 4 is insightful analysis of the source text. Okay, all right, whatever. Demonstrates sophisticated understanding of the analytical task. We'll go over what that analytical task is. A thorough, well-considered evaluation of the author's use of evidence reasoning. This is the analytical task, by the way, and how the author uses persuasive elements, et cetera, et cetera. Relevant, sufficient, strategically chosen support for claims, in other words, quotes, et cetera. Consistently focuses on those features of the text that are most relevant to addressing the task. Okay, and then we have scores, of course, 3, 2, 1, where you get down to offers little or no analysis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now we have the writing, which is what this test used to measure only, pretty much, writing and grammar, but now it's just one element of these 3 that they've included now. So let's take a peek at what they want on the writing. So the writing is cohesive and demonstrates a highly effective use of command of language. So here you got to show off, okay? You got to have a precise central claim. You got to make a point. A skillful introduction and conclusion. So they're looking for what a lot of teachers call a hook, right? The response demonstrates a deliberate and highly effective progression of ideas. In other words, you got to build your argument. So you really have to think through where you're going to go on this thing. So I would pay attention to this a lot here. Has a wide variety of sentence structures. So just, be creative in your sentences. Don't just do A, B, C, do them all the same. Mix it up a little bit. The response demonstrates a consistent use of precise word choice. You know, in the writing section that they don't like imprecise words. Good writing is concise and precise, and then you build up your variety in your sentences from starting with a very precise and directly stated claim, or whatever you're describing in the sentence, or whatever the sentence is doing. So stick to active voice, subject, verb, object, and then build up from there with all your different clauses. Okay, you don't need to be fancy, but you need to be skillful. Shows a strong command of the conventions of standard written English. In other words, grammar. Okay, you're not using improper, punctuation, blah blah blah. You've gone through the writing section. That's a pretty good place to go to figure out your grammar score on this. Is they measure that on the writing section. Okay, so the big ideas here are that we need to be paying attention to. Let's go back up here. So just to rehash this, the reading, we're showing that we understand the source text, right? We understand the ideas, and we are interpreting it correctly, and we're bringing in good evidence. Okay, that's this part here. The next one, which is your analysis, is that you have a job, which is to consider the author's use of evidence and persuasive elements, blah, 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 and you are to give a solid analysis of that in which you are insightful, you make a consistent claim, and you focus on the relevant passages from the text, and then, of course, your actual writing, that you're cohesive, you have a central claim, you have a skillful introduction and conclusion. One thing on the conclusion I would mention here is to, it's good to think through your conclusion before you start writing. So you go through your thesis, okay, this is what I want to write about, think of your hook, whatever you want to do, your skillful introduction. Think about the conclusion, because the conclusion is super important. And the conclusion should inform back to your essay itself. So the conclusions do 2 things. So they summarize, right? Summarize. Some teachers call that restate your thesis, okay? That says restate your thesis, okay? But the more important thing a conclusion does is it tells the reader where you've gone, okay? So this is what we've done, reader, okay? Good for you. And then why it's important. This could be in the sense of a larger claim of relevancy for your essay and your point. It could be something about it could be, inviting the reader to go do something or to think about something, or why just what you've done is important. So it's that statement of relevancy that makes a strong conclusion. So we have a strong conclusion. So we have an introduction that states what we're going to do, and the conclusion tells us what we've accomplished and why it's important. If you think through the relevancy before you go about doing your body text, then you can be informing each paragraph with this notion of relevancy. That'll make an altogether stronger essay. Okay, so here are our instructions here. In this particular passage, it's adapted from, I want to look at the passage and see what it is. So adapted from former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, forward to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, Seasons of Life and Land. Okay, sure. So we know what this is about, a photographic journey filmed by some other dude. And this is the forward. In other words, this is Jimmy Carter talking, introducing this book. Now, our job is not to interpret what he says, it's to analyze the effectiveness about how he goes about saying what he says. Okay, so let's read the instructions. As you read the passage, consider how Jimmy Carter uses evidence such as facts or examples to support his claims. Okay, so that means we have to identify what his claims are and then identify what evidence he's used and how effective that, how does he use it and how effective it is. Okay, then we're going to see how Jimmy Carter uses reasoning. Why? To develop ideas and connect claims and evidence. So he can throw out facts and examples, but it's got to be connected back to supporting his claims. It's almost saying the same thing, but reasoning means not just the application of evidence, but how it fits in logically to the overall argument. And then we're going to consider the stylistic or persuasive elements, such as word choice, appeals to emotion, to add power to the ideas expressed. In other words, does this essay work as a persuasive text? That's what this is about. And our job is to analyze that in the text itself. So if we go down to the bottom here, we have the passage, and then we're going to go, and this is always the same. They just put in the author's name in here. Write an essay in which you explain how Jimmy Carter builds an argument to persuade his audience. Okay, that's what we're after. We're going to measure the persuasiveness of this text and we're going to analyze how that works out, and we're going to make judgments on it. And then they tell us what he does. He says that the Arctic wildlife refuge should not be developed for industry. In your essay, analyze, so break it apart, analysis to tear things apart, how he uses one or more of the features listed in the box above, which we went over, emotional appeals and facts and evidence, blah, 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 and to strengthen the logic and persuasiveness of his argument. So we are not considering what he says. We're considering how he says it, how he goes about making his case. Be sure that your analysis focuses on the most relevant features of the passage. In other words, so I guess don't get too petty on something is the best I can say about that one. I kind of have a hard time seeing where a student would not do this because this is a short passage. But remember, we got to bring in evidence about what we are saying. Now, this is important. Your essay should not explain whether you agree with Carter's claims, but rather how Carter builds an argument to persuade his audience. Very good. So let's step back here and take a peek at the text. Again, I'm not going to write this text, but I am going to kind of just sort of browse through this and pick up some of those key things. Now, we think about rhetorical analysis, and we think about the different pieces that people can use to put forth an argument. Remember, it's persuasive. If you think to your reading section, the expository or persuasive essays, we have, a lot of those typical things you learn in your AP Lit or your Lang classes, blah, blah, blah. Things like the basic Aristotelian or Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosophers' ideas on persuasion, logos, which is logic, pathos, which is emotion, and ethos, which is kind of an interesting word, ethos. Ethos is like your legitimacy as an author, your legitimacy as a person who is making this claim. But there are also patterns to an ethical persuasion, because you also want to appeal to the ethics of your audience. And so ethos goes beyond just not just who you are and what your credentials are to be talking about this, but how do you connect to the audience? So an ethos, and we think about an ethos like in history, is what is the ethos of a community? Well, what do they agree upon? What is it that binds them together as a community? Okay, and so that word is a little bit odd. You don't need to fret over it. You don't need to talk about the ethos of Carter's thing, but you could bring it in if you feel comfortable with that. So we're going to look for imagery, similes, analogies, metaphors, alliteration, repetition. The great Roman orator Cicero liked to use what he called little daggers, words like little daggers. So it'd be staccato little things, because he says that really made the audience kind of take in and listen to him, because he was using in Latin, there are a lot of consonants that come together. And so he was very, very good at that. Another example would be antithesis, which is a text that most people are familiar with, the Gettysburg Address. Lincoln uses that a lot. So an antithesis is a contrast. So this and then that. And so one of the most famous lines in the Gettysburg Address is, "Those who died here that the nation might live." In other words, we're here to bury those who died so that the nation can live. So that's an antithesis, kind of a contrast, a duality in the language. A couple other things that we can look for is playing games with words. There's a lot of that. So words can be literal or metaphorical. They can be both. If you recall the test one expository essay by Virginia Woolf, who's a fabulous writer, she talked about being on a bridge, and that bridge was both literal, looking at what she called the sons of educated men passing by to see them, and it was also metaphorical because a bridge is something you cross to accomplish something as a metaphor. So it's a really interesting solipsis she was actually using there. One of the more famous ones that you might be familiar with is from the Rolling Stones song "Honky Tonk Women." She blew my nose and then she blew my mind. Okay, that's a solipsis. All right. Other things like parallelism, like father, like son. You could quote the Roman conqueror Caesar, Veni Vidi Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. That's a sort of a parallel structure. In the writing section, these they want parallelisms. You need to match your comparisons correctly. You need to have your verb tense matching. That's called parallel structure. In rhetoric, we're talking about parallelism, like repeating words in the same form over and over again. And that's part of the alliteration. That's part of that general skill set of a persuasive piece. Lincoln in the Gettysburg Address said, "We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground." So that's a sort of a parallelism there. Other things we can do is create rhetorical questions. Yeah, they might use sarcasm if it's effective. I don't know, oxymorons, just to draw reader attention. We can invert things. We can state one thing, make a claim that someone else might argue against it, and then tear it apart. That's kind of an inversion. There are different things that we can look for, but generally, we're going to be paying attention to just general things like imagery, which we're going to see this text will use a lot. So let's go in here. We'll talk about, by the way, logical fallacies on test 10, because what I want to do is I want to go through kind of supporting a piece as effective, and you can take that position. Remember, you have to take a position. This piece is effective because this piece is ineffective as persuasion because. So remember, that's our job here, is to look at how well this person does it. And you can go in between. You can say it's good and bad here. But let's just take a peek at what he is doing in this text. Okay, this one is pretty straightforward. So the Arctic Wildlife Refuge stands alone as America's last truly great wilderness. Let me do the highlighter here. Okay, this magnificent area is vast as it is wild. So that's a form of that kind of duality, or maybe even a solipsis, from the windswept coastal plain where polar bears and caribou give birth. Now, I don't know quite why he's just talking about them giving birth, but there must be some imagery there he wants us as the reader to take to. The towering Brooks Range where Dall sheep cling to cliffs, right? That's an alliteration there. And wolves is an imagery. Wolves howl at the midnight sun. So obviously Carter wants us to feel really good about the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge as this place where all these wonderful things go on with the animals. Okay, and then he goes in and he brings about a personal story. So here he's kind of setting up his authenticity. So we went there. I was there. This is an appeal. This is an ethical appeal, saying we went there. We were fortunate to go and camp and hike, and during that, again, we were just using that similar language. The bright July days, we walked ancient caribou trails, brilliant mosaics, blah blah blah. Hugged the tundra, timeless quality, great land, never setting sun. So here he's remember, his argument is that we should not industrialize. We should not. I think they told us down at the bottom that he's going to argue. Remember that they do give us a description of his argument. They said down here that write an essay in which you explain how Jimmy Carter builds an argument to persuade his audience that the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge should not be developed for industry. Okay, so they give us the benefit of the doubt about what he's saying there. So use that information for you. Okay. Now we're going to go down a little bit further. One of the most unforgettable and humbling experiences of our lives. So these are all a lot of emotional appeals. Okay. I haven't really seen too much logic yet here. Blah blah blah. We hope to see to our amazement we were witness. So he's telling a story. He's bringing the reader in as a narrative. In rhetorical analysis, I'm not sure what that would be called, but it's an emotional thing where we humans like to hear a story. So don't forget that just general logic. That might even be the logos of it, because he starts with talking about, what is so wonderful. Then here's our experience, and then he's going to move into, oh my God, what would happen if this great wilderness was consumed by a web of roads and pipelines, okay, and drilling rigs and industrial facilities, okay, would forever. Notice he uses a lot of that, like this great forever. He repeats that a lot. So that's going on here as well. Countless right? He's trying to get us to imagine just how, like you said in the beginning, vast as vast as is wild, and he repeats a lot about how it's going to be forever, timeless, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's go down a little bit further here, and we're gonna, and then he's going to get into his logical argument. So the countless number of animals that depend upon the northernmost terrestrial ecosystem. Okay, so now he's going to be telling us his core sort of logic on why he's trying to persuade us. So he goes into it that he's going to appeal here. Now this is an effective appeal to authority. This dude was a president. And he's saying, look, other presidents have agreed with me on this. So here we are. So the appeals to authority can be effective or ineffective. But in this case, I think he's got an ethos. He was president, and as do other presidents. He's talking about how they all also agreed with him. And then he says where he signed an act of Congress that safeguarded the 100 million acres of the parks. OK, and then it created this refuge. And so he's telling us the background here. We're building up, again, the logic of this argument here. And then he says, since I've left office, there have been repeated proposals to, now here's where he's going to go after his opponents, okay? Those attempts have failed because of the tremendous opposition by the American people. Again, that's an ethical appeal about the Indians, the indigenous people. So he's bringing in our sensitivity to a culture that has depended, and now he's going to be bringing us back into this sort of this imagery of the caribou herd for thousands of years. Okay, so it's been there permanently. Having visited many Aboriginal peoples around the world, I can empathize with their struggle to safeguard the precious human rights. So he's pulling in an additional argument here. He's saying not only should we leave it alone because of the wilderness and the value of the wilderness to our nation and to our heritage and the permanency of the earth, but also because of the people who are originally from that area. They also will be impacted by this. And so we must look beyond the alleged, now he goes after his opponents, the alleged benefits of the short term. So now he's attacking the other people. So this is a there's some things that can be effective in this and some that are ineffective when you set up what we call a straw man argument. So I'm not sure that his opponents would agree with him, saying that a short-term economic gain. But anyway, he's sort of making a claim for what his opponents or those who want to develop the Arctic refuge would be saying. So we can call that either strong or weak. It's up to you. If you have to make your decision on it. And it says it might provide up to 1 to 2%. So he's just using again, here's evidence. This is evidence build his argument here. So the evidence, he really hasn't given us too much evidence. We've just been talked about. The evidence up here is all the animals and then his own personal experience. So he gives a testimonial to it and how he was sad. And then some other of the evidence he used was how other presidents have supported it, right? And the American people have supported it. And then let's continue on. At best, the Arctic refuge might provide 1 to 2% of our oil each day. We can easily conserve more than that amount by driving more fuel efficient vehicles, okay, instead of tearing open. So he goes back and forth on his facts and his evidence and the emotional appeal. All right, there are a few places, again, this sort of absolutism that he uses. We could call this a form of a superlative, which is a something that says this is the best, right? This is the most, it's the wildest, it's the vast. So he uses a lot of superlatives in here, by the way. It's a symbol of our national heritage. So here's an ethical appeal, a remnant of the frontier and our first settlers once called wilderness. Little of that precious wilderness remains. It will be a grand triumph. Again, it's a superlative. It's grand if we preserve the Arctic refuge in its pure, untrammeled state. To leave this extraordinary land alone will be the greatest gift we can pass on to future generations. So we've done our reading. We kind of thought through again, how does he use one or more of the features listed in the box above or others that you can bring in to strengthen the logic and persuasiveness of his argument? And you must bring in evidence and show how that supports your argument of what you say he's saying. So you can take a pro or con opinion on this. I'll do another one taking a contrary opinion about saying practice test 10 essay. We can tear apart that one. This one, I think it'd be easier kind of to go with Carter, just say, oh, his emotional appeals, give the evidence. He gives in his ethos or his credentials, saying that he's been there and that he was the president before. We could talk about that. and then we can bring in his facts. Does that support his argument? Look, because you only get 1 to 2% of our oil, we can get that by driving more fuel efficient vehicles instead of tearing open the heart. So he kind of goes back and forth between those appeals. We see that one, here's a fact, and then here's an emotional appeal. Okay, hope this is helpful. Again, I really think through. Let's actually, before we stop, let's think through if we are to say, well, all these appeals are persuasive. That might be the claim we make. Let's talk about why this is important. So if we're going to build a conclusion that shows relevancy, it's hard because we're not going to do the relevancy of what Carter says. Okay, remember that. Our job is not to explain whether we agree with him or not. So our statement of relevancy is not going to be about his claim. It's going to be about the effectiveness of how he goes about making that claim. So if we do have a statement of relevancy, we're going to be talking about how this demonstrates an effective story, built with images and interspersed with facts and authority, can move an audience. Okay, that might be a type of statement to wrap up your agreement with this is being effective. Or we could say the opposite. Say, look, this shows how this use of just ridiculous superlatives and minimal facts doesn't mix in well to make this persuasive at all. It actually fails the reader by not being able to. And I got to have my evidence and my logic and my analysis to show that. Okay. Great. Hope that's helpful for you guys. I will do test 10 later. Not right now. I wanted to show you don't have to agree with these things as being persuasive, okay? You can argue back. And in that one, we'll talk about logical fallacies. All right. Hope this helps. See ya.